Subclasses are a mechanic that have a lot of interesting things going on. 5e did not invent subclasses. Did 4e even? I don't think even 4e invented it. I think, no, 4e was before Pathfinder First Edition. So technically 4th edition did it first. Pathfinder First Edition, if I'm understanding correctly, because I have never played this game, but I've been told that every class in that game has a subclass type mechanic, an optional feature available very early that sort of affects how your character progresses over time. A subdivision of the group of features that is a class. They made it standard for all classes, whereas 4th edition had it for most classes, not quite all. So, but they are an entirely different beast in 5th edition than they are in 4th or from Pathfinder, I think even 2nd edition. Even Pathfinder 2nd edition, because the other has an entirely different kind of class structure, so it's like the comparison wouldn't even be applicable, really. Subclasses in 5th edition have a lot of really interesting implications about the way they work. There was a movement early on in the 1D&D playtest to standardize all subclasses to 3rd level. I kind of like that idea. I like standardization. It helps for a lot of things. I think it should have been standardized to 1st level. There's a reason they don't do that, and it's like there's solid logic there, but it misses the point, which is that you don't want to overload the 1st and 2nd level of a class because it is too easy to multi-class and get all that stuff. So you don't want to front load the classes too much. I think that misses the point, which is that multi-classing shouldn't do that. It's a better fix is to fix your multi-classing system and make classes functional and have identities be solidified very early on, as early as possible. And I guess as early as possible is 3rd level in 5th edition. So you're not really a full character until you're 3rd level. And I'm pretty sure I've talked about that before. Subclasses. So I kind of like the way that subclasses work, and I kind of hate the way subclasses work. And I'll tell you what I like. I like additional options. I like additional choices. Further subdivisions, because the classes are rather broad, aren't they? There's kind of a lot going on there. Subclasses allow you to sort of focus in on something that you like about the class identity and expand that and make it bigger and make it a larger part of your overall kit and your character's overall identity. I like this. And some subclasses do this better than others. Some subclasses don't do this at all. Champion, for example. You would expect champion to be, you are just sort of generally better at everything the fighter does. But actually what the champion is you are not significantly better at anything the fighter does. What's the biggest thing that champion gets? The main reason why everyone takes it, expanded critical range. That constitutes like a tiny, like 1, maybe 2 DPR increase overall. It's so tiny. It's basically insignificant. But then there's other things like the Battle Master. The Battle Master, which is honestly what the fighter should be. It should be baseline. And thinking about this came from a thread on Reddit about incorporating subclasses into the base class because they're so iconic to the class or because the class needs the boost. A lot of people say that the Battle Master should be incorporated into the fighter baseline. In the 5th edition playtest, it was. Which means that between the playtest and the release, they actually they grabbed a bunch of features out of the fighter and frankly out of the other martial because they had maneuvers as well, and yanked them out and made them a subclass and gave those classes basically nothing in exchange. So that's a problem. But we can also talk about subclasses for classes that don't need a power boost, things that like wizard subclasses, etc. These are mechanics that give you features at multiple levels for a choice that you make at one level. Now, that's not inherently a bad thing, but it is a little bit different than what I usually think of when I think of like a subclass from 4th edition. Because a subclass in 4th edition, you choose at first level, and the ability that you choose affects how your character plays because it interacts in interesting ways with all of your various powers and other abilities. But it doesn't dictate what abilities you gain. It is just the one ability itself. What it's actually, and I realized this kind of recently, what actually 5th edition subclasses are more like is Paragon paths. Because in a Paragon path, you choose it at 11th level, and it gives you features then, and it gives you additional features and powers later at prescribed levels. That is a package of abilities that you get for a choice at a specific level. And then the abilities are spread out over multiple levels. That's what a subclass actually is. And most Paragon paths were linked to a specific class anyways. There was a few racial ones, and a few like, a couple that were linked just to a power source. So like, any martial can take this one, any arcane can take this one, etc. But for the most part, Paragon paths were linked to classes. So they kind of are subclasses in the 5th edition sense. Now, here's where the divergence comes in. Most 5th edition subclasses don't really have a strong mechanical identity. A lot of them, most of them, not all of them, have an identity that is tied to theme. Let me give you an example. The Conjuration subclass for the wizard. Mechanically, it does not actually encourage you to use or learn or cast conjuration spells until like 14th level, which is basically post-game. Who plays at 14th level? The playable level range for 5th edition is 3 to 12 at a stretch. So what the conjuration subclass does is it gives you a minor conjuration, which is an ability. It conjures an object that no one else can do this. And it's kind of neat, but it doesn't actually encourage you to use conjuration spells. It doesn't interact with the spell school conjuration. And then after that, you get benign transposition. Again, a unique ability that allows you to swap places with another character, or I think it also allows you to swap to other characters. But again, it doesn't actually interact with the conjuration school at all. And then, compare that to things like the Evocation Wizard, which does explicitly allow you additional benefits when you cast evocation spells. Or the Abjuration Wizard, which gives you specific benefits when you cast abjuration spells. These kinds of things. So there's a difference. There's I wouldn't say a gulf, because it's not about power. You usually think of like a gulf between these two things as being like a description of power. Because I wouldn't want to comment on that without doing research, and I'm not going to do any research. But there is definitely a divide between subclasses that are just about theme and subclasses that actually have like a mechanical difference or like a mechanical incentive to play your character differently than you would if you didn't have a subclass at all. The prime example, Echo Knight for the fighter. The Echo Knight creates a new play experience. It says, hey, you're not going to play like a normal fighter. You have this special ability, and by using this special ability, you are going to have an entirely different kind of play experience than you would otherwise. And I think that is ideal for a subclass. That's kind of what subclasses should be. In a perfect world where all the classes are balanced, subclasses will be strong enough, potent enough, and distinct enough to create new and interesting playstyle changes for the classes that they are attached to. 5th edition does not accomplish this, but in a perfect world, you could see the existence of subclasses doing these kinds of things. Now, here's where we run into some problems. And I'm actually not one of those people who has like a big issue with like some classes get their subclass at first, some get it at second, some get it at third. I don't actually care. I kind of wish they were all the same, and I kind of wish they were all at first, but I understand why they're not. And it's because of that stupid multi-classing system that 5th edition is clinging on to. I hate it. It has I've talked about this already. The fifth edition multi-classing mechanic causes like half the problems with the class design. Basically, if you see a problem in class design, you can probably trace that problem back to multi-classing. It's that bad. It influences the game that much in all negative ways. It's terrible. Anyways, so I understand why they didn't put it at first or second for most classes. Most classes get it at third. And I'm kind of okay with that, with the caveat that I think the game should tell players up front, like, listen, if you're not brand new to RPGs, if you have played RPGs before, if you played this RPG before, start at third level. Third level is when the characters actually start being characters. And that's when you have that mechanical depth. So I wish that was the case. I also wish that subclasses were always designed to create new play experiences. I wish that they were designed to interact with your existing mechanics in ways that encourage you to behave differently, encourage or enable you to behave differently, to give you new action options or to enhance and modify your existing actions in ways that have like a pointed and intended gameplay experience. And it just isn't the case in 5th edition. So I had originally intended, when I started thinking about doing this particular topic, I was like, I should do a video on the failures of the subclass mechanic. And I don't think actually it is a full-on failure. There's absolutely a lot to like about subclasses. But the way that they have been implemented is, I don't want to say problematic, but it's not ideal. There's too many subclasses out there that either just don't do anything, or there's this idea that every class should have one subclass that is just more of your base thing. You know, open hand for monk, champion for fighter, frenzied berserker for barbarian. These are subclasses that in concept are just more of your class's base kit. You do that a bit better. And they tend to be pretty bad. They tend to be kind of awful as a rule, because you're not gaining new mechanics. And honestly, the Wizards of the Coast design team just isn't skilled enough, or they don't care enough to make these subclasses actually potent. So they end up just being these sort of like lame duck kind of mechanics that just sort of sit there, and a couple of them look decent, but they largely are not. And I don't think they should exist. I used to think that they should. I've done them myself. My Barbarian rework has a Frenzied Berserker subclass that is intended to be just, you do this more. You know, you generate more rage, you can use more rage at a time, you know, more rage powers, that kind of stuff. Like, it doesn't have any flavor to it, really. It's because it's kind of the neutral, the flavorless subclass. Like, you don't have, like, your subclass doesn't match any of these. Just take this one, you'll be a little bit better. And it's clearly, obviously, the weakest, because it kind of has to be, doesn't it? Because you don't want your flavorless subclass to outperform your cooler subclasses. That wouldn't be great. I have since come to the conclusion that such subclasses should not exist. I think all subclasses should have a clear, defined direction, both mechanically and theme-wise. And it should move with purpose in that direction. They should be like very clear mechanics that say, like, hey, this is how this subclass changes your play style and your play experience. And here's the mechanics that make that happen. That is far too, like, mechanics focused and too game design focused for Wizards of the Coast to ever actually do. Though they have gotten close a couple of times on accident. You know, like the Echo Knight is quite a flavorful and fun subclass for a class that really, really needs it. The fighter is kind of, you know, the king of the garbage pile in terms of, like, power and effectiveness. And the Echo Knight subclass can sometimes make you forget that because it's just that good and cool. So those are my general thoughts on subclasses. They should serve to create a change in gameplay experience. Oftentimes they don't. If they don't, I think that they are failing at what that mechanic is really there to do. So in a future edition, would I like to see subclasses go away? No. I think subclasses are, A, here to stay, regardless. And B, I think they're not a bad idea. They just need to be implemented a little bit better in a variety of ways and for a variety of reasons.